The first time I saw Mara Ellis step into the Interstellar Academy's predator training compound, I knew someone was going to bleed. I just didn't expect it to be the predators. My name is Vorthak, and I've been teaching combat dynamics at this academy for 16 solar cycles. I've seen thousands of species walk through those reinforced doors. Proud Krolix warriors with their bone plating and razor mandibles, stealth-bred Quinn assassins who could phase through solid matter, even a few Gormath heavy-worlders who could bench press a shuttle. But humans? Humans were still new to the galactic community, still largely unknown, still underestimated. And this particular human was 5'0" of strawberry blonde hair, freckles, and what her species called an attitude problem. This is your student? Commander Zelthrus clicked his mandibles together in what I'd learned was the Kralix equivalent of suppressed laughter. The human delegation sent us a child. She's 19 standard years, I replied, checking my datapad. Adult by human standards. Top marks in theoretical combat, wilderness survival, and something called not taking crap from anybody. I paused. That last one might have been added by her instructor. Zelthrus made that clicking sound again. She looks like she'd snap in a strong breeze. And what's that thing in the carrier on her back? That thing was currently trying to eat through the reinforced mesh of its travel container while making sounds that could only be described as a chainsaw being murdered by another, angrier chainsaw. Her approved companion animal, I said, squinting at the documentation. Species classification, Mellivora capensis, common name, honey badger. I looked up. Apparently they're quite popular on Earth. It sounds rabid. The paperwork says it's just, quote, a little cranky from the flight. What happened next would become something of a legend in the academy, though nobody quite tells it the same way twice. Here's what I saw. Mara walked into the compound with the confidence of someone 3 times her size. The honey badger, which she'd named Buckshot, because of course she had, rode on her shoulder after she'd let it out of the carrier. The creature was maybe 3 feet long, built like a furry battering ram with claws that could open a security door, and had eyes that suggested it had murdered before and would absolutely murder again. The predator cubs were already there. 6 of them. Young Kralix, Vortan, and Skelix, all between 15 and 17 standard years, all from warrior castes, all bred, trained, and raised to be apex hunters, all about to learn a very important lesson about Earth. The biggest one, a Kralix named Threx, saw Mara first, his mandibles spread in what passed for a grin among his people. Look, brothers, the humans sent us a snack. His pack laughed. It was the kind of cruel laughter that teenagers of every species seem to perfect, that particular mix of mockery and cruelty that comes from being just old enough to be dangerous but too young to understand consequences. Mara stopped walking. Buckshot stopped chewing on her hair. Both of them turned to look at Threx with an identical expression that I would later describe in my report as aggressively unimpressed. Did you just call me a snack? Mara asked, her voice carrying across the compound with perfect clarity. If the designation fits, tiny mammal, Threx replied, his 3 friends flanking him in a classic predator spread formation. Perhaps you should return to the soft courses. Leave the real training to real warriors. I should have stepped in then. Protocol demanded it. But I was curious. Human psychology was still being studied, still being understood. How would she react to direct intimidation? Mara set down her gear pack with deliberate care. Buckshot climbed down from her shoulder and sat beside it, radiating an aura of barely contained violence. The little beast's fur stood on end, making it look twice its normal size, which was already considerable for something that probably weighed 20 pounds soaking wet. Real warriors? Mara repeated, tilting her head. You mean the kind who pick on someone half their size on her first day? Wow. Such brave. Very warrior. Much impressed. Her voice dripped with enough sarcasm to corrode hull plating. Threx's mandibles clacked together, a sign of rising aggression. You mock me, human? I'm not mocking you, Mara said, examining her fingernails with exaggerated disinterest. That would require me to take you seriously enough to bother. Right now, you're more like background noise, like a malfunctioning air recycler. Annoying, but not really worth the effort to fix. One of the other cubs, a Vortan with purple scales, hissed appreciatively. She has teeth. This one. Verbal teeth, at least. Let's see if she has real ones, Threx said, dropping into a combat stance. That's when I definitely should have stopped it. But here's something I'd learned about humans in my research. They don't back down. Not from bigger threats. Not from worse odds. Not from logic, reason, or common sense. It's like their entire species looked at the concept of survival instinct and said, "That's cute, but what if we did the opposite?" Mara didn't take a combat stance. She just stood there, weight on one hip, arms crossed, looking for all the galaxy like she was waiting for a delayed transit shuttle. Buckshot, however, made a sound. It started as a growl, then rose into a chirp, then descended into something that I can only describe as what nightmares sound like when they're trying to warn other nightmares to stay away. Threx lunged. He was fast. Kralix juveniles are born fast, trained faster. His claws extended mid-leap. His mandibles spread to expose the paralytic glands, his entire body a weapon honed by millennia of evolution. Mara sidestepped. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't the complex defensive form of a Quinn Master, or the calculated efficiency of a Gormath defender. She just moved. Exactly enough. At exactly the right moment. Threx sailed past her, off balance, committed to a strike that hit nothing but air. And Buckshot went absolutely berserk. The honey badger hit Threx while he was still airborne. 20 pounds of concentrated fury and bad attitude launched itself like a furry missile, latching onto the Kralix's thorax with claws that punched through his training armor like it was decorative foil. What? Get it off. Get it off. Threx's bravado evaporated instantly as he crashed to the ground, the honey badger riding him like a bronco from hell. Buckshot was making sounds I didn't know biology was capable of producing. Screaming, snarling, hissing, all while systematically trying to dismantle Threx's armor plating with teeth that seemed far too large for its skull. The other cubs rushed forward to help their friend. Buckshot, spread pattern, Mara said calmly, like she was ordering coffee. The honey badger released Threx and spun to face the incoming cubs. Then, and I watched this happen with my own eyes, it charged all 4 of them simultaneously. It shouldn't have been possible. It violated several laws of physics and at least one tactical doctrine, but Buckshot somehow managed to be in 4 places at once, a whirling dervish of claws, teeth, and what I can only describe as weaponized anger. Cubs scattered like seeds in a solar wind. A Skelix tried to use his camouflage. Buckshot sniffed him out in 3 seconds and attached itself to his face. 2 Vortons attempted a pincer move. Buckshot ran between them, clawed both, and somehow tied their tails together in the process. The last cub, showing more intelligence than his peers, simply ran. Buckshot chased him twice around the compound before returning to Mara's side, barely winded, and sat down like nothing had happened. The entire assault had lasted maybe 45 seconds. Threx pushed himself up slowly, armor scored, pride demolished. What is that thing? This? Mara reached down and scratched Buckshot behind the ears. The honey badger leaned into her hand, eyes half closed in contentment, looking for all the world like a peaceful domestic pet. This is Buckshot. He's a honey badger. We have a saying on Earth. Honey badger don't care. Honey badger don't give a damn. It attacked us. One of the Vortans wheezed, still trying to untangle his tail. You attacked me, Mara corrected. He defended me. There's a difference. And honestly, you should be grateful. I was about to handle it myself, and I don't have Buckshot's restraint. I finally stepped forward, datapad in hand. Medical assistance is en route. Cubs, report to the healing wing. Miss Ellis, please restrain your companion. He's perfectly restrained, Mara said. He's sitting. Look at him, he's adorable. Buckshot yawned, displaying teeth that belonged on something 3 times his size, and made a sound like a garbage disposal digesting gravel. Adorable, I repeated flatly. Where I come from, yeah. I made a note on my datapad. Your planet terrifies me. You should see Australia, Mara said cheerfully. Makes my hometown in Montana look like a petting zoo. The cubs limped away, casting fearful glances back at the small human and her smaller, infinitely more violent companion. I could already see the shift in their body language. The swagger was gone. The easy cruelty had evaporated. They'd learned something today that no amount of training could teach. Never, ever underestimate Earth. Over the next few weeks, I watched Mara integrate into academy life with the same chaotic energy as her first day. She excelled in combat theory, not because she was the strongest or fastest, but because she thought sideways. Where other species saw walls, she saw opportunities. Where they saw rules, she saw suggestions. And Buckshot became something of a mascot. The cubs learned to give him a wide berth after the incident, as it came to be known. But I noticed something interesting. They also started asking Mara questions. About Earth, about humans, about honey badgers. So, they really don't care? Threx asked one day in the cafeteria. His armor had been repaired, but his ego was still in recovery. Mara grinned. Honey badgers have been filmed fighting off lions, hyenas, and leopards. There's documented cases of them raiding beehives, getting stung hundreds of times, passing out from the venom, then waking up and finishing eating the honey. They're not brave or stupid. They just persist. They don't know how to quit. Like humans, I observed from my monitoring station. Mara looked up at the camera and winked. Exactly like humans, Professor Vorthak. The training cycles continued. The academy threw challenges at its students, designed to push them to their limits. Endurance runs through hostile terrain, combat simulations against AI opponents, survival scenarios with limited resources. Mara and Buckshot crushed every single one. The endurance run through the volcanic fields? Buckshot found a thermal vent network that cut the route in half. The combat simulation. Mara reprogrammed the AI to fight itself while she ate her lunch and watched. The survival scenario? She built a shelter, established a water collection system, and was growing vegetables by day 3. How? Commander Zelthris asked me after reviewing the footage. How is she doing this? Human innovation, I suggested. They're persistence predators. They don't give up. They adapt. She's redefining the entire training program. I know, I said, allowing myself a small smile. Isn't it wonderful? But not everyone thought so. There was a group of senior students, graduates from the Predator programs, who'd been watching Mara's progress with increasing irritation. They'd spent years building reputations as the Academy's elite, the best of the best, the ones who'd never failed a simulation, never lost a combat exercise. And here was this tiny human, making it all look easy. Their leader was a Krolix named Vexer, twice Threx's size and 3 times as mean. Where the cubs had been cruel from ignorance, Vexer was cruel from experience. He'd broken students before, made them quit, sent them home in tears or bandages, sometimes both. I saw him watching Mara during her advanced weapons training, saw the way his mandibles twitched, saw the calculation in his compound eyes. Professor, he approached me after the session. I'd like to request a training exercise with the human. Denied, I said immediately. On what grounds? No. On the grounds that I know exactly what you're planning, Vexer, and it won't end the way you think. His mandibles spread in what might have been a smile. Are you saying the human needs protection? I thought Earth warriors were supposed to be fierce. It was a trap. A social trap. If I protected Mara, it would imply she needed protecting, which would undermine everything she'd accomplished. If I didn't, Vexer would have his chance to, as he saw it, put the human in her place. I'm saying you should be very careful what you wish for, I replied carefully. Then you won't object to a formal challenge? Tomorrow. Combat ring. Standard rules. I looked past him to where Mara was teaching a group of younger students how to field strip a plasma rifle. Buckshot sat on the table beside her, occasionally batting small components across the surface for his own amusement. That's Miss Ellis's decision, I said finally. Not mine. Vexer's smile widened. Excellent. The story of that conversation spread through the academy like wildfire. By dinner, everyone knew. By lights out, the betting pools were established. By morning, the entire student body and half the faculty had gathered at Combat Ring 7. Mara arrived exactly on time, Buckshot trotting beside her, both looking completely unconcerned. Vexer stood in the center of the ring, all 8 feet of armored muscle and predatory confidence. His training weapons were mounted on his carapace, claws, sharpened, mandibles dripping with non-lethal paralytic that would still hurt like stars going nova. Last chance to withdraw, he offered magnanimously. No shame in recognizing superior force. Mara stepped through the energy barrier into the ring. She wore standard Academy combat gear, light armor, no weapons except what the arena provided. Buckshot remained outside the barrier, sitting calmly, watching. "Oh, honey," Mara said. And that sarcasm was back in full force. "The only thing I'm recognizing is that you've never fought someone who grew up dealing with actual predators. Where I'm from, we have grizzly bears that weigh 1,000 pounds and can run 30 miles an hour. We have mountain lions that hunt in ambush. We have wolves that hunt in packs. You know what we do when we encounter them? Run," Vexer suggested mockingly. "We make ourselves look bigger, make noise, and stand our ground. Because predators, real predators, they respect one thing. They respect something that refuses to be prey." Mara's smile could have cut glass. "So no, I'm not withdrawing. But you can if you want. I'll understand if you're scared." The crowd went absolutely silent. Vexer's mandibles clacked together rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. "Begin." The fight lasted 6.5 seconds. Vexer charged. Mara dodged. He swung. She ducked. He tried to grab. She wasn't there. And then, in a move that I had to review 3 times to fully understand, she used his own momentum against him, redirected his mass with a precisely placed strike to his thorax joint, and sent him crashing into the arena wall hard enough to trigger the safety barriers. The ring's AI declared her the winner. Vexer stared at her from his position on the ground, mandibles slack with shock. "How?" "Judo," Mara said, offering him a hand up. "It's a human martial art. Means gentle way. The idea is you use your opponent's strength against them. Physics does the rest." She paused. "Also, you telegraph your moves like 3 seconds before you make them. Might want to work on that." And that's when something shifted in the academy. That's when everyone stopped seeing Mara as the weird little human with the psychotic pet. They started seeing her as, well, one of them. A warrior. A student. Someone worth learning from. Vexer became one of her staunchest allies after that day. He started attending her training sessions, asking questions, learning human combat techniques. Other students followed. The academy transformed over the following months, but not in ways anyone expected. Mara didn't just participate in training. She fundamentally changed how people thought about combat itself, and Buckshot, that furry ball of concentrated violence, became the unlikely mascot of what students started calling the Earth approach. "It's not about being the biggest," Mara explained one afternoon to a mixed group of students in the tactical planning dome. Buckshot was curled up in her lap, snoring loud enough to rattle the furniture. "It's about being the most adaptable, the most stubborn, the most willing to do whatever it takes." A young Skelix named Ritha raised her hand tentatively. "But what if you face something truly overwhelming? Something you can't outsmart or outfight?" Mara scratched behind Buckshot's ears, and the honey badger grumbled in his sleep. "Then you make them regret even trying. You make victory so expensive that winning isn't worth it anymore." She grinned. "Back home, we had this thing called mutually assured destruction. Terrible policy for nations. Excellent strategy for personal survival. I watched from my observation post as the students absorbed this. They were learning something the standard curriculum never taught, that warfare wasn't always about superior firepower or better armor. Sometimes it was about sheer bloody-minded refusal to lose. But there were complications brewing beyond the academy walls. The Kralix High Command had taken notice of events at the training facility, particularly how their carefully bred warriors were being routinely humbled by a single human and her companion animal. Ambassador Krethix arrived unannounced one morning, his ceremonial armor polished to a mirror sheen, his mandibles set in a expression I'd learned meant official business and probable unpleasantness. "Professor Vorthak," he greeted me formally. "I require access to the human student. She's in wilderness survival training," I replied, checking my schedule. "Won't be back for 3 days." They dropped the students in the Razor Canyons with minimal supplies. Krethix's antennae twitched with irritation. "Alone? With Buckshot? The violent mammal? That's the one." The ambassador settled into a chair that creaked under his weight. "The High Command has concerns. This human is disrupting traditional warrior development. Our cubs are questioning established doctrine, asking why they can't train like humans, requesting access to Earth combat manuals." He paused significantly. Some are even suggesting we recruit humans for our military forces. I set down my datapad. And this is a problem because humans are unknown, untested in real combat. These are just academy games, Professor. Controlled environments, safety protocols. What happens when the stakes are actual survival? When there's no medical team standing by? I think you're about to find out, I said quietly, pointing at my monitor. The wilderness survival exercise had just triggered an emergency beacon. Mara's beacon. We scrambled a rescue team immediately, loading into atmospheric shuttles with medical personnel and security officers. Commander Zelthris piloted while I monitored Mara's vital signs on my datapad. Heart rate elevated but stable, I reported. She's moving. Broadcasting from the Central Canyon network. I frowned at the readings. Wait. There are multiple life signs near her position. Big ones. Native predators? Zelthris asked, banking the shuttle. Hard. Thermal signature says yes. At least 6 of them, maybe more. I pulled up the species database. Stars above. Those are Rendax pack hunters. What are they doing this far from their normal territory? Ambassador Krethix leaned forward from his restraint harness. How large are these Rendax? Adult males average 12 feet long, 800 pounds, armored hide, claws that can shred durasteel. I checked the data again, hoping I'd misread it. They hunt in coordinated packs. Bring down prey 3 times their size through blood loss and exhaustion. And you left a human child in their territory? The Razor Canyons have been safe for decades. Students train there every cycle. I was pulling up historical records, trying to understand what had changed. There hasn't been a Rendax sighting in this region for 15 years. We found Mara 30 minutes later, and the scene that greeted us would be forever burned into my memory banks. She'd taken position in a narrow ravine where the canyon walls created a natural choke point. Smart defensive thinking. Behind her were 4 other students, 3 cubs and 1 adult, all injured, all conscious. Also smart. She'd found survivors from other training groups and consolidated their position. In front of her was a wall of snarling, snapping Rendax. 7 of them. Their pack leader a massive scarred male with 1 eye and more muscle than should fit on a single skeleton. And between Mara and the Rendax was Buckshot. The honey badger had positioned himself at the narrowest point of the ravine, fur standing completely on end, making him look like an enraged puffball with teeth. He was making sounds I'd never heard before, a combination of roaring, screaming, and what I can only describe as cussing and mammal. Hold position. I ordered the pilot. Deploy observation drones. I need to see what's happening. The lead Rendax lunged. Buckshot met him head-on, latching onto the predator's snout with jaws that didn't know the meaning of let go. The Rendax, this 800-pound killing machine, shrieked like a scared cub and thrashed violently. Buckshot held on. The other Rendax tried to flank. Mara threw something, and I realized she'd fashioned crude explosives from her emergency supplies. The blast wasn't enough to injure the creatures through their armor, but it scattered them, broke their formation, disrupted their pack coordination. She's using Earth guerrilla tactics, Zelthris breathed. Improvised weapons, terrain advantage, psychological warfare. Another Rendax charged. Buckshot released the first one and launched himself at the second, going directly for the eyes with surgical precision. The predator bellowed and retreated, pawing at its face. The small mammal is targeting sensory organs, Ambassador Krethix observed, his tone shifting from dismissive to analytical, minimizing its size disadvantage by attacking vulnerable points. Mara wasn't idle during Buckshot's assault. She'd armed herself with a sharpened metal rod, probably salvaged from wreckage, and was methodically stabbing at any Rendax that got too close. Not deep strikes, she didn't have the strength for that, but painful ones, annoying ones. Strikes that said this prey fights back. The Rendax pack leader, the one-eyed monster, made a decision. He roared a command in whatever passed for their language, and the pack began to withdraw. They weren't retreating from superior force. They were retreating because Mara and Buckshot had made the cost of victory too high. The pack leader could probably win if he committed fully, but he'd lose pack members in the process. Maybe several. And for what? Prey that fought like demons and tasted terrible anyway. Better to find easier meals. The Rendax melted back into the canyon shadows, leaving behind scorch marks, claw gouges, and 7 very confused students. Buckshot sat down, licked his paws like he'd just finished a light workout, and trotted back to Mara. "Good boy," she said, and her voice was shaking now that the danger had passed. "Such a good boy." "Yes, you are." We landed the shuttle and deployed immediately. Medical teams rushed to the injured students while I approached Mara's position carefully. Hands visible, movements slow. "Miss Ellis, are you injured?" She looked up at me, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Not fear. Exactly. More like the aftermath of fear. That shaky relief that comes from surviving something that should have killed you. "Twisted ankle," she reported, voice steadying as she slipped back into student mode. "Some cuts and bruises. Nothing serious." She gestured to the others. "Ritha has a broken arm. Vexer's got deep lacerations on his thorax, needs immediate attention. The two youngsters are in shock but physically okay. You found other students and protected them. They were scattered, injured, easy prey. Seemed like the thing to do." She paused. "The Rendax weren't supposed to be here, were they?" "No. Something drove them from their normal territory. We'll investigate." I knelt down to her level. "You saved lives today, Mara. Real lives. Not a simulation." She looked at Buckshot, who was now investigating an interesting rock. "We saved lives. Team effort." Ambassador Krethix approached slowly, his entire demeanor changed. "Human Mara Ellis. I came here today to recommend your expulsion from the Academy, to suggest that your species was not suited for warrior training." Mara's expression went carefully neutral. "And now? Now I'm going to recommend that the Kralix High Command establish a formal military exchange program with Earth. We have much to learn from your people. And from your companions." He gestured at Buckshot with obvious respect. "That creature has more warrior spirit than soldiers twice my size." "He's special," Mara agreed, wincing as medics examined her ankle. "As are you, apparently." The rescue and subsequent investigation revealed something troubling. The Rendax had been driven from their territory by illegal mining operations in the outer canyons. Operations that violated about 15 different galactic treaties and put students at risk. Mara, still recovering, helped crack the case. She'd noticed unusual mineral deposits during her survival trek, photographed them with her emergency beacon, and provided data that led investigators directly to the mining site. The criminals were arrested, the Rendax were relocated, and Mara became something of a celebrity across the galactic networks. "Human student defeats pack of apex predators with only a small mammal for backup," the headline screamed. "Earth creatures prove more dangerous than previously thought," another proclaimed. My personal favorite was "Honey Badger still doesn't care now with photographic evidence." But Mara herself seemed uncomfortable with the attention. She returned to classes as soon as medical cleared her, limping slightly, brushing off questions about her heroism, with characteristic sarcasm. "I didn't do anything special," she told a reporter who'd somehow gotten past security. "I just didn't want to die, and neither did Buckshot." Turns out that's a pretty powerful motivator. The final weeks of the training cycle approached, and with them came the trials. Every student had to complete a final examination, demonstrating everything they'd learned. Combat skills, tactical thinking, survival abilities, all tested in a comprehensive simulation. Mara's trial was scheduled for the last day, and somehow everyone knew it would be different. Commander Zelthris designed it personally. A scenario that would test not just her abilities, but her decision-making under impossible circumstances. The simulation, he explained to her in the briefing room, involves a hostage rescue. Multiple civilians held by hostile forces in a fortified position. You'll have limited resources, no backup, and a ticking clock. "Sounds fun," Mara said dryly. Buckshot, sitting on the table, made a noise that suggested his definition of fun involved more biting. "There's one more element," Zelthris continued. "The hostages include children from multiple species, including human. You may not be able to save everyone, you'll have to make choices." I saw Mara's jaw tighten. "You're testing whether I'll sacrifice non-humans to save my own species. I'm testing whether you understand the reality of warfare. That sometimes there are no good choices, only less terrible ones." The trial began at dawn. Half the Academy gathered in the observation galleries to watch. Even Ambassador Krethix had stayed, his official duties apparently less important than seeing how this played out. The simulation was brutal. Mara infiltrated the hostile compound with Buckshot. using stealth and misdirection to bypass external defenses. Then, things got complicated. The hostages were split between two locations. She could reach one group quickly and extract them with minimal risk. The other group was deeper in the facility, heavily guarded. Rescue attempt would be dangerous and time-consuming. The first group contained human children. The second contained Kralix, Vortan, and Skelix younglings. I watched her face on the monitors as she processed the scenario. Saw the moment she understood what Zelthris was really testing. "Buckshot," she whispered. "I need you to do something crazy. Crazier than usual." The honey badger chittered, which I'd learned meant, "Tell me more." What happened next was either brilliance or insanity, possibly both. Mara split up. She rigged a distraction near the human hostages, drawing most of the hostile forces in that direction. Then she sent Buckshot, to rescue them. The honey badger, wearing a tiny camera so she could monitor his progress, somehow managed to herd 5 terrified human children to the extraction point, while fighting off simulated enemies with what could only be described as enthusiastic ultraviolence. Meanwhile, Mara went after the other group, the dangerous group, the ones her own species would expect her to abandon in favor of human lives. She fought through 3 levels of security, took injuries that would have dropped most students, and reached the second group of hostages with 90 seconds left on the clock. Not enough time to extract them safely. So she did something nobody expected. She fortified their position, distributed weapons from fallen enemies, and taught 5 alien children how to fight back in less than 60 seconds. "Here's what humans know," she told them, voice steady despite the chaos around them. "When you can't run and you can't hide, you bare your teeth and you make them bleed. You make them remember that you were here, that you mattered, that you fought." The simulation ended with Mara and the younglings holding their position against overwhelming odds, Buckshot arriving with the human children as reinforcements, and a simulated rescue team finally breaching the facility. She'd saved everyone. Total time, 43 minutes. Injuries sustained, 17. Enemy combatants neutralized, 42. Hostages rescued. All of them. The observation gallery erupted in cheers that crossed species lines. Commander Zelthris stood slowly, his mandibles spread in what I'd learned was genuine respect. "How did you know the honey badger could handle the rescue alone?" Mara was breathing hard, holding her ribs where the simulation had registered an impact. "Because Buckshot doesn't understand concepts like impossible or suicide mission, he just understands protect. And those kids needed protecting. And why risk yourself for the non-human hostages? Because they're kids, Commander. That's the only qualifier that matters." She met his gaze steadily. "You wanted to know if I'd choose human lives over alien ones. The answer is no. I choose people over enemies. I choose protecting innocence over tactical convenience. And if that makes me a bad soldier in your book, then I'm okay with that." Zelthris was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something I'd never seen him do before. He bowed, a full formal bow of respect. "You'll make an excellent officer, Mara Ellis. Perhaps the best this academy has ever produced." Graduation came 3 weeks later. Mara stood with her class, wearing the formal uniform of an academy graduate. Buckshot, sitting at her feet wearing a tiny matching cap that he tolerated with obvious disgust. Ambassador Krethix presented the awards personally. When he reached Mara, he paused. "The Kralix High Command has authorized me to offer you a commission in our defense forces. Leadership track. Your choice of assignment." Mara blinked. "Sir, I'm human. Your forces are Kralix. Our forces are warriors. Species is secondary to skill." He handed her not 1 medal but 3. Valor in combat. Tactical excellence. And this is new. The first ever awarded. The Earth Citation. For demonstrating that sometimes the smallest fighters cast the longest shadows. The crowd roared approval. I found myself making sounds that probably approximated human cheering. Mara accepted the medals with shaking hands. "I don't know what to say." "Then say nothing," Krethix advised. "Let your actions continue to speak as loudly as they have." After the ceremony, I found Mara in the courtyard, sitting on a bench. Buckshot sprawled across her lap in the late afternoon sun. "Proud of yourself?" I asked, settling beside her. "Exhausted mostly," she admitted. "Proud second. Wondering what happens next third." "What do you want to happen?" She was quiet for a moment, scratching Buckshot's belly while the honey badger made sounds of contentment. I want to go home for a bit, see my family. Let them meet Buckshot, assuming he doesn't eat my uncle's chickens. And then I want to come back. Help train the next group. Show them that size doesn't matter, species doesn't matter. What matters is heart, brains, and a willingness to be too stubborn to quit. She grinned. Plus, someone needs to keep writing the Earth combat manual everyone keeps asking for. The galaxy won't know what hit it, I observed. That's the idea, Professor. That's the idea. 3 months later, I received a message from Mara. She was back on Earth, visiting family in Montana. The message included a photo of Buckshot playing with what appeared to be 3 very large dogs, all of whom looked appropriately terrified. The text read, "Buckshot says hi. The dogs say please send help. See you next cycle, Professor. We've got work to do." I forwarded the message to Commander Zelthris with a note, "Recommend expanding the Earth exchange program. If this is what they consider normal, I want to see what they consider exceptional." His reply came quickly. "Already approved. The humans are sending us 20 students next cycle. May the stars have mercy on us all." I looked at the photo again. Buckshot, small and furry and absolutely undefeated, staring at the camera with those eyes that suggested he'd fight the entire universe if it looked at him wrong. And I thought about Mara, barely 5 feet tall, teaching alien warriors that the measure of a fighter isn't size or strength but pure, unfiltered determination. Humans had been in the galactic community for less than a decade. In that time, they'd rewritten our understanding of persistence, redefined our concepts of impossible, and introduced us to honey badgers. The galaxy would never be the same. And honestly, that was probably for the best. Because if there's one thing I learned from Mara Ellis and her psychotic companion, it's that underestimating Earth is the fastest way to end up very surprised and slightly mauled. The predator cubs who'd teased her on that first day. They became some of her strongest advocates, spreading the gospel of Earth, stubbornness to anyone who'd listen. Threx, the Kralix who'd started it all, ended up writing his senior thesis on human combat psychology. His conclusion, which made me laugh out loud when I read it: humans don't win because they're strong. They win because they're too stupid to know when they're beaten, and too stubborn to care. I had that thesis framed and hung it in my office, right next to a photo of Buckshot, frozen mid-attack, all teeth and fury and concentrated bad attitude. Because some lessons need to be remembered. And the most important lesson Earth taught us? Never, ever underestimate something small that refuses to back down. The universe is a big place, full of massive civilizations and enormous warriors and weapons that can crack planets. But sometimes, the most dangerous thing in the room is 5 feet of human determination and 20 pounds of honey badger that absolutely, positively, does not care. My name is Vorthak. I teach combat dynamics at the Interstellar Academy, and I will never, ever tease the human students again. Neither will anyone else, if they know what's good for them.